welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my August wrap up for you guys. I didn't have the most successful reading month in August, mostly because I DNF'd a bunch of books. I'm only going to be talking about 2 I think that I DNF'd just because I got over halfway in them. Otherwise I won't speak about the ones I've DNF'd. But a lot of these I don't have the physical copy of because we had Galleathon round 2 in August, which means that a lot of these were NetGalley arcs or ebooks, and so I cannot give you a physical copy to show. The first book that I read this month was P.S. I Still Love You by Jenny Han. I gave this a 4-star. I love this book series so far. This is the second book. I do have the third in my book cart ready to read. I much preferred the first one. I think I gave the first one 5 stars. This one was still good because it gave it a 4-star, but I cannot tell you the plot line without spoiling the first one. So I'm just going to give you my thoughts. My thoughts are the characters are a bit more annoying in this one. Even characters I like are a little bit more annoying, and I didn't really care about reading about them. The ending, she did not end up with who I wanted. That's no spoiler there. That's just my personal opinion. I didn't like it. I'm sure I know who the series will end up with, but I just don't think I want that myself, and I'm upset about it. So I think that tainted the experience for me. However, I do love these books. They are easy to read, they're light, they're more than the typical romance, and I love the representation. So, a good book to start the month with. Next we have The Nothing Man by Catherine Ryan Howard. I was sent this as an arc to read and review before it released this month. It is about a book where the victim of a murder, or murderer, who murdered her whole family, writes a memoir. It's not really a memoir, it's about her experience and her journey towards solving the case of finding this killer. And the killer is called The Nothing Man because the detectives have no evidence, they have nothing on this man to convict him. And we are seeing from the perspective of the murderer that she is discussing in the book, and we see him reading this book to determine how close she is to getting to find him. And it says in the blurb, so it's not a spoiler, but then his journey knowing he has to kill her. This book had so much potential. I'm sorry, but a book where you follow a murderer reading about his murders, and they were brutal murders. It trigger warning for some serious rape. It was kind of hard to read. But this book just did not execute the way I wanted it to. I had so many hopes and they all just kind of fell flat. For me, all my expectations were kind of rumbled and not really coming through. It was a bit boring, if I'm being honest. The entire book is just him reading this book. He does nothing until right at the end, and even that's so anticlimactic I was bored. I gave it a 3-star overall because I still think the concept was great, the writing style was good. I just think so much more could have been done with such an exciting storyline. So why wasn't it, why was it boring? This shouldn't have bored me. This is such a cool concept, but it just wasn't executed for me personally. I think a lot of people could love it if they like a slow burn where nothing really happens till the end. If you like that kind of book, I don't, you probably love this story. But knowing for me that I was expecting so much for nothing to happen until probably 80% of the way through, if even that, if not more, it just fell flat. Wasn't for me. Very disappointing. Still good because I gave it a 3-star. I know I'm giving a really harsh review, but compared to the plot line, which I had 5-star, it was a 5-star prediction. I thought, how could this go wrong? It is perfect. It went wrong. It's very sad. So now we are moving into my Galleathon reads. First of all being Clap When You Land, which I did DNF, but I'm speaking about because I read 70% before I DNF'd it. And I know you're probably thinking, why the hell didn't you just read the remaining 30% then? I couldn't be bothered. Once again, this book was so boring. The book follows 2 girls who do not know about each other, and yet they are sisters with the same father. Their father is in a plane crash and dies, and it is their journey to finding out who each other are. The main reason that I hated this story was because the girls, when he died, both of them only talked about the loss of money. Oh, how will I go to my nice fancy school anymore? How will I go to this school anymore? how will I know how to do this? How will we be able to afford the bills? And I understand that is a serious complaint. I get that. I know when you lose a parent, you will worry about the money you've lost. Not once did they worry about the father they'd lost. It was just like, oh yeah, well, yeah, it was sad because we've lost him, we'll never get to do this. And I won't be able to go to my school anymore. I couldn't stand it. It felt like two kids who don't physically care about their father at all in any way, shape or form. And it was really upsetting me, really angering me. So I was not emotionally attached to this story like everyone else is, because all I could see was the negatives of two spoiled bratty children. So by 70%, I was so angry. I was like, nah, it's done. I'm not reading this anymore. This is awful. I know this is a favourite for a lot of people. We must have just interpreted differently from the words. But my interpretation was not a good one, and I thought it was offensive to speak of their father in that way. And it was also boring. 70% in, and all they did was grieve, really. There was, like, I understand it's a grieving story, I get that. But I mean, which they didn't even grieve, they grieved over money. But they also didn't do any development. There was no, like, personal growth. There was nothing. And I don't care if that last 8% was the best growth anyone's ever had. The 70% of the book should have had that, and I just wasn't feeling it. A lot of people who don't like this book don't like the fact it's written in verse. I like verse. I think it's a nice way to write a story, and I enjoy it myself. So I knew that wasn't the issue. But yes, I've had one hit from Elizabeth Acevedo and one miss now. So I'm really excited to see Poet X and see how that one falls on the scales, because I'm so confused on this author. Forgot to say, I give Clever When You Land a 2-star. The next book that I read was The Switch by Beth O'Leary. I listened to this on audiobook. I thought this story was so cute, okay? It wasn't just that typical romance, like the flat share that Beth O'Leary wrote. Let me have a look. Got it right here. This book I loved and gave a 5-star because it was so much more than a romance. It had deep elements. It had other storylines fitting into it. The same thing happened in The Switch. So what we follow in The Switch is a woman and her grandmother, and they live in very opposite places. The granddaughter lives in London, like central London, and the grandmother lives in some small village town. And they decide to swap lives so that the grandmother, who's divorced her husband, I think, gets to experience the life that she wants to live before meeting him and live in central London, carrying out the great lifestyle she wants. And meanwhile, the granddaughter is on leave from work, paid leave, because she's been overworking and she's not doing so well, so she agrees to stay in her mum's house to help her mother, and they have a tense relationship, so there's like development to happen there. Obviously there's a lot of romance, but it's just more of a family loving story and showing what really matters and personal growth. It is not a basic romance, and sometimes you can get bored in a romance because you know what's going to happen. It's a love story. This one was so different and just had so many aspects that you couldn't physically be bored, and I loved it. I really liked the audiobook as well. They had dual narrators for both perspectives, because you do follow the perspective of the granddaughter and the grandmother. Overall, amazing. I gave it a 4-star. It was a high 4-star potential, 4.5. Really, really fun read. It has actually stuck with me. Like, I really do remember that story and I really enjoy it. Next, I read Safe by S.K. Barnett. This book follows a family who have lost their daughter at the age of 6, and we see them now 14 years later, I think. So the daughter should be 20, she hasn't returned home. Suddenly, we're following the narrator of this girl who goes and is the missing child to this family and gets reunited with the family. The thriller element comes in as a bit of a twist where the family maybe aren't as safe as they seem. Safe? I'm trying to only give off what the blurb gives you and not anything more than what I've read. I'm just going to stop there because I'll end up spoiling something. It is full of twists. Now, I was going into this because I was not having the greatest Galliathon, because what you haven't heard in this is like 60 NFs already by this point, okay? Like, I was done at this point in Galliathon, so I just expected this to be another bad read. No, it was not. This was gripping from the first page. I was engrossed all the way through. It was amazing. Twist after twist after twist. And I thought, oh, I know all the twists. I got one right and that was it. And I was messaging Connor all these series and he'd read it just before me and I was like, well. Overall, amazing. I was going to give it a 5-star, but I did not like the ending. And I know a lot of people think, well, it's only an ending. No, it's really important to me. The whole book has to be good to be a 5-star. And the ending was just really wasn't my favourite. I actually really didn't like it at all. I rewrote it in my head. I'm trying to remember a different ending. So I did end up going with a 4-star. But it was definitely a good read. And I would recommend you pick it up if possible because I would say it'd be worth your time. It was a really good thriller. And something different as well. It wasn't your typical thriller, which I enjoyed. Next, I read Never Say No by Elizabeth Neep. Now, I read something else by Elizabeth Neep at the beginning of the year. I think it was The Spare Bedroom, which I also read on NetGalley and loved. So I was thinking this one would be great. I really mesh with this writer's style. I cannot remember for the life of me the blurb. I do not remember one thing about this book. Basically, this girl's in a very stable relationship and he's going to propose to her, or she finds a ring to propose to her. And she's like, I'm going to say yes. And then she just decides, oh, do I want to say yes? She starts having queries about her relationship. And then she meets a guy in her new job. And she's having the hots for this guy. I'm not gonna give spoilers. But I'm going to give a minor spoiler in saying, I just don't like the cheating trope. Okay, I don't like it. I don't want to read about it. I think cheating is very, very bad and I feel uncomfortable reading about it. And I cannot ship 2 characters when they cheat. So to see this book just be filled with it, I was like, nah, I'm sis, I'm good. But I don't know what else to say to you because I physically do not remember this book. Let me read my review a moment. So, trying to relate to a bunch of characters who just sleep around is very difficult. It makes it hard to connect and sympathise with them. I realised how sleep around, I was meant to put sleep around with each other more than sleep around. Because I don't mind reading a character who sleeps around. That's great, I actually love it. But sleeping around with each other, and I mean like, there's like 6 people and they're all going to sleep with each other. I did not feel sorry or relate to the protagonist at any point because of the trope we don't like. And I said about how it was difficult to fall into the story and indeed very difficult to push through. Sorry for having to read my review, but I physically cannot remember that book. It was a shambles of a story. I gave it a 2-star to be generous, I suppose, knowing that maybe if you weren't bothered by the cheating trope, you would enjoy this. On personal enjoyment, it'd probably be more like a 1 because it was just bad. It's a real shame because I really enjoyed Elizabeth Neep's last story, as I said, and I really had high hopes for this one, but I physically did not remember a thing about that. I can't remember half of the stuff that happened. Now I can remember a best friend that I didn't like, boyfriend I didn't like, the guy, the romancer, bad boy, didn't like him, protagonist, didn't like her. Just overall terrible, very hard to relate to, very hard to read. But I'd already DNF'd so many books, I was like, just push through. I kind of wish I hadn't, because what was the point? Don't remember it anyway. Next, I read One by One by Ruth Ware. This book is a thriller where, it's always so hard describing books. A group of people who work together go to a hotel near ski slopes. So they go on a skiing holiday. They belong to this Spotify-inspired app where it's a music app but also your social media. It sounded really, really cool, to be honest. And obviously you have the two hosts, I suppose, of the hotel. So one's like a hotel manager, the other's like a chef, but I think they're together. They're either brother or sister or they're together. Now I know that's both very different things. Together. Brother? Together. It doesn't matter. And then one of them goes missing off the ski slope and they cannot find them. And it's considered a murder and they all have to detect the case. And then they get snowed into this house together knowing one of them is a murderer. This book, I was a little bit harsh in my rating. I gave it a 3-star. I think it'd be more like a 3.5. I definitely think it has potential to be a 4. It was either the fact that I'd had so many disappointing reads that I wasn't quite in the mood and didn't enjoy it as much as I thought I would, but I did think that the beginning was quite slow. And I also thought it was very predictable. You know how in a murder mystery it usually does like that, it makes you think it's a certain someone and then it does the other person. Like for this one, it never really made you think it was a specific person because it made you think it was everybody like a lot of them do. But to me, it was quite obvious who it was. I don't know if that was just because I've read so many murder mysteries now that I'm like, well, I know who you're going to make it out to be. But I did guess, and that obviously kind of ruins the story a little bit for me. But the actual storyline and the execution is really well written, really good, really intriguing, and to me, I think it would be the perfect story to read in the winter when you're cozy and it's snowing, and it would give you that really creepy vibe. So I think in the future I might have to reread that at Christmas time. Overall, definitely recommend. It's a 3.5, I think a 3.5. But you know how harsh my rating is. I'd still recommend. I'd say this more of a 4. Next, I read Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson. And this was perfect to dive into straight after Galliathon because I needed a good read. And boy, was this one. This is a murder mystery story where we see a past timeline, but I don't know how long ago it was. I'm thinking like 200 years. In 1936, the Ellingham School, the wife and daughter of Mr. Ellingham, who runs a school, were kidnapped, and and one of the students who was at the school was murdered. Then we follow in the present day. We follow a protagonist who is called Stevie Bell, and she is back at the school with the intention to solve the murder as part of her project. So we follow Stevie Bell in her journey to solve it. I will say we don't know who's done it yet because the whole point of the story is it's a 3-book long series, although maybe 4 now, I'm confused. But so far it's a 3-book long series, and obviously I think the murder mystery is going to be in all 3. But then something happens in this book and instead you follow that as well. So there's plenty of storylines to go along with it. I love this. I absolutely adored this. It was written to perfection. I gave it a 4.5. It was so close to that 5. The only reason I didn't get it is because I would love for this to be maybe not adult, but like new adult. So like that in between young adult and adult, because I think sometimes if it had been more graphic and creepy, it would have been spectacular. But I love this. It gives such cozy vibes. A cup of coffee, cup of tea, cup of hot chocolate, sat down with one of those like ASMR rooms in the background. Bam, this one out. It is so good. Once again, I would say read this in like Christmas time, or you know, when it's raining and creepy vibes. Oh, I'm gonna reread this. It's definitely one of my favorites now. I love this and I cannot wait to get the other 2. I'm so excited. And it's gorgeous. I've just hit myself in the face with it. Next, I read Girl Serpentthorne by Melissa Bashardost. I hope I didn't butcher that. This follows, I don't really know how to describe this. There's a princess. No, I'm confused. Yes, a princess called Soraya, and she cannot touch anybody because if she touches them, they die. And it's any living being, like a butterfly, a bug, a human, it doesn't matter, they will die. And so she lives her life not being able to touch anybody. And I don't want to say too much because there's a whole like mystery on how that's come about, and I don't want to spoil that for anybody. Is her journey to discovering herself and proving that she is more than just the monster she thinks she is, and her journey to try and remove this curse that has been put on her. I feel like I described that terribly. I'm so confused. The first half of this book I was so enjoying. I was relaxed, I was calm, I was having a fab time. Then we got to halfway and I was kind of like, is anything gonna happen? Are we gonna get some action? It'd be nice. But no, nothing happened. Which then led me to disliking it more and more because I was like, come on, something needs to happen, I need some action. And then when the action did happen, it was like that slow-paced action, which is fine. I like a slow-paced action. But nonetheless, it was a slow-paced action, which, on top of a book that took so long to get to said slow-paced action, I wasn't satisfied. It just wasn't doing it for me in the way I think this would have if it had been slow action from the beginning and not a story to tell, like a fairy tale from the first 3/4 and then a slow-paced action. It just didn't quite hit the mark, but I did give it a 3-star. I still enjoyed it. The world is really, really lovely to read about. The characters are good. I enjoyed reading about them. It's just a shame that they kept the beautiful story going on too long to lose its impact of how beautiful it was. That's all. If you can read a slow book, a perfect one for you. Next, I read Loveless by Alice Oseman. This follows, what's her name? Georgia on her journey to discover her sexuality and discovering what aromanticism and asexuality is. And I just want to start by saying I know a lot of people's criticisms about this book are that it only portrays one type of asexuality. I understand that, so if you go into this, understand that this is Alice Oseman telling her story and not a representation for everybody who is aromantic or asexual. Just a disclaimer to put that out there, it is one person's story, it is one side, but it did do a great job of informing me a little bit more. I knew what asexual was on the front, but I didn't quite understand aromanticism, and I didn't understand the dynamics of what it meant to be asexual. And so I feel really, really good reading this, knowing I've informed myself a little bit more. And I definitely want to read more books with this representation. That would be fabulous, especially with other people's stories, so that we know we get a more well-rounded understanding, and not just one person's. But it was really, really good. The dynamics of friendship in this story are so good, and I just want them to be my friends, except for the one best friend who I hate. Everyone else seemed to love, and I was like, ugh, Pip, ew. But everybody else was amazing. And it's just a girl's journey through university. She's just in uni, meeting new friends. She's never had a kiss. She wants to get that kiss out of the way. She's trying to decide how to go about relationships. She tries dating her best friend. It's just all a disaster until she understands why. Now, usually as someone who doesn't like slow stories, this wouldn't have matched me. But going in, it's a discovery of sexuality. It's not going to be a fast-paced action, obviously. So I was perfectly happy going into this. And of course, it has no fast-paced action. It is just this discovery story of sexuality, which is going to be slow, but in the best way. It was so well written, so intriguing, and I felt part of the world. And obviously, being a British uni student myself, well, not anymore, but I was a British uni student myself last year and for 3 years. I don't know why I'm having such a hard time describing that. I could really relate to what their experience was in university, and it was really well written, so you can tell Alice Oseman's definitely had that typical uni experience. I would totally recommend reading this, and if you're an American and you want to read about the British uni experience and see how it relates, like how it differs to you, a great book to read because it is very well representative of it. Then I had a DNF, but I want to show it because I read so much of it, which was over half, and I just want to discuss it for a momento. We have Sweet Evil by Wendy Higgins. My lovely friend Robbie sent me this and we did a buddy read on it. However, I got halfway through and had to stop reading because it was frustrating me so bad. So the point is that they are half human, half devils, or half angel, half devils. And basically they represent the 7 sins. So these two on the front, she's the main character and he's the love interest. She is the demon of substance abuse, and he is meant to be representative of lust. And because of this, he has sexual intercourse with a lot of people. But she at one point gets in a sticky situation of sexual assault, intended rape. And I don't think that was well written about at all. And then later on it is brought up again as she thinks of rape victims and their pain, and she literally balls up the pain and throws it away. but it felt wrong to me. It felt like the way it was described was like balling up someone else's pain and just throwing it. It wasn't described in a nice way of doing it. It was written in a like offensive way to me. Personally, that's just how I felt reading this. And then at times she wouldn't have sex with him because they weren't together, she didn't want to. And then he'd go elsewhere to be with someone else. And she'd be like, don't go. And he'd be like, well, are you going to do it with me? And she was like, no. Well, then I'm going. Talk about manipulative emotional abuse. No, I physically couldn't read anymore. I kind of ruined Robbie's experience reading it because he was having a great time. He was just chilling, reading the book. And then I was like, with all my problems, and he was like, oh, I didn't think of that. And I was like, sorry. Oops. I'm not going to give you a rating because I didn't actually rate it because I didn't finish it. And I don't know what I'd rate it because I was too focused on the issues I had with it. Also, the audiobook is terrible. The worst Texas accent I've ever heard in my life, and I hated it. We're about to end this wrap-up on a bang, okay? Because the last book I read in August was House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas. This big boy. This story follows Bryce Quinlan, and she lives in Crescent City, which is based on New York, and it's in a world where demons and werewolves and all fantastical creatures have come in to invade Earth, and humans are slaves in this world. They are useless, no one wants them, treated like rubbish. And Bryce is a half human, half fae. And we follow her when the beginning of her book, her best friend and the immediate love interest is murdered. And then she, 2 years later, gets interested in being the detective of this story and finding out who did it. I don't even know what to say about this book. I loved this. I think it is the best book I've read this year so far. When I say I sobbed. I don't think I have ever cried so hard over anything. Pain. So much pain. Ever. In terms of media, like book, film, I've not cried that hard before over something else in someone else's life. But this book had me going. I at one point was listening to the audiobook in the car and I had to pull over because I was crying. And then by the time I got to my destination, I had to sit in the car to listen to the end of the sex scene. I was like, this has been a dramatic journey for me. I was very, very overwhelmed in the situation. I absolutely loved this story. I adored this story. I want to reread it now. I have never read a Sarah J. Maas book before. I own Throne of Glass and I own the ebook of Court of Thorn and Roses, so I am now making it my priority to read everything she's ever written because this was unbelievable. The writing was out of this world. The storyline was out of this world. As you can tell, I don't even know what to say. I'm speechless. I'm so upset to have finished this book. You know when people say, I wish I could delete my memory and read that book for the first time again? I've never really quite understood that. I've always been like, well, I'm happy to reread this one. I want it out of my brain so I can read it again and cry all over again. I love you. This is the love of my life. And it's so heavy, so I'm going to put it down now. Overall, this month was an interesting one. We had a lot of DNFs. We had a lot of bad reads. We had a lot of good reads. If you like this video, hit the like button. Leave me a comment about anything. Even an emoji if you want. I don't mind. I shall see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.